Hello, everyone. Welcome to Webtoon Book Club. Today's episode 11 of Me. So, our story begins with our main character just doing his normal daily routine in college. And he's extremely busy. He is involved in multiple different clubs and activities and things and a job. And it's hard juggling all that around. So one day he ends up coming across a typewriter and he just messes with it and ends up getting and it turns out it's actually a time machine that transports him into the future where he meets the people who made it and I guess lost it, that simply just tell him, yeah, you can have it, just use it however you want, we don't care. He's just like, okay, sure. So he goes back home and thinks of something clever that maybe he can use this time machine to get more stuff done, do more things. And at first, he uses it to go back throughout the days to. He goes back within the last few days to do things that people have kind of got on him for not being involved in. And this works out fine at first, but he realizes he still can't be everywhere at once. So he comes up with an idea to have a date set that he will constantly travel back to, collect another timeline version of himself, and then just move forward from there continuously. But he lays out that he needs more than just one of himself. He's going to need multiple. And that turns out to be, well, 11. It's the name of the story. And he needs 11 of himself to be able to balance all the activities in school and work and friends, and also not overdoing himself and then leaving him time to enjoy himself and sleep and relax and break and whatever. Working out this whole massive complex schedule, bringing 11 of himself into one timeline, which gets really crowded in his very cramped dorm room. But they do use it for what a lot of people would probably think of: go back and get a winning lottery ticket. And then once he has an absolute crap ton of money, he rents out a multiple story place and turns the bottom floor basically into a secret bunker, which has multiple rooms for basically all the work and all the regular stuff that he wants, that he just likes. Basically turn it into both an office and a relaxing home, while having the main room up on the top floor as a non-suspicious home with nothing to see. And the scheduling even includes being around his own family members. So while all that's going on, at some point he ends up meeting a girl at a coffee shop who is a very interesting character, especially considering he can't get a grasp on her, whether or not she actually likes him or not, or if she's actually likes guys or not, because she is very loose on this stuff because she presents herself as a social warrior, somebody trying to stand up for others' rights, which is always a good thing. But the way she tries to explain herself, I'll get into at the end because it is very confusing and kind of nonsensical. And I'll explain that later. But moving on, things go well for him. as he's able to basically accomplish all the things he wants to do and put himself into a position that would be good for his future. All of their futures. He even relays his meeting up with this girl to the other versions of him, who seem pretty ecstatic about it. But it's only the original version that's meeting up with her. The other versions are off doing everything else. Or just not caring. Or some of them do care. It's a mixed bag. Either way, uh years end up going by before things start to finally take a bit of a turn. Mainly, he starts to get a little bit more involved with this girl, and she actually shows a little bit more that she is that she is interested in him, even though she has done a very, very, very good job at hiding that by being the unique character that she is. So when some action between those two go down, uh, uh, eventually his close relationship with her ends up disrupting the schedule that has worked for years at this point. And the other versions of him start to get a little bit jealous and then also start questioning things, and stuff starts to kind of fall apart. And somehow she ends up finding out on her own that he she thinks that he's cloned himself until she sees the typewriter time machine and he relays the plan that he originally had. So some of the versions of him went off and ran away, and some of the versions are just like, we don't know what to do now. So now a mission is off to go find the two that ran off, to go find them. And when they do eventually find them in, I think, Boson? I think it's Boson, the city in the like absolute south of South Korea, which is apparently like a really nice vacation spot against the South China Sea or Sea of Japan. It's right. It's around that corner. It's like the south east corner of the country. And based on other comics, it seems like it's a pretty popular vacation spot, or it's just a nice location to put to place events in because it's right near the ocean, so it has a nice ocean view, and it's a recognizable city that people know of, which would also make sense for people to go vacationing to. So, yeah. Anyway, basically confronting those two, it's a whole brouhaha, but it basically ends with all the versions of him basically decide to go do off their own things. A few of them stay in that timeline and just kind of go off and run away with each other. Literally, two versions of him just decide to, we're going to move out of the country or just go traveling or whatever. Like, they're just going to do their own thing. I think a few versions of him decide to go back to their own version of timelines, even though that might be a little screwy at this point, because I think it's a time frame of about 5 years that go by. And he gets to be with the girl, and everybody ends up being happy in the end. So, yeah, that's the end of 11 of Me. It's not that actually long of a story, but it actually has a lot of stuff that does happen in it. So, it's a pretty fast-paced comic to an end cuz it is pretty short. Like I don't even think it's 30 episodes. It might be, but that's not very long. And they're not that long of reads. So, it's a pretty short comic and events happen pretty quickly. Like, eventually, they turn the time machine back to the original owners, and then they go back to their own timeline, and that's more or less how the story actually kinda ends, with a bit of an epilogue, but Yeah. Now, for the main character girl, when I say her reasoning for her logic is kind of broken, it's this. She believes that there is no choice in the world and things are kind of just destined to happen as they will. And her example of this is basically how people and where people are born. So basically, if you are a person that born in, I forget what her example was. I think her example was like some a better term for what is essentially like a modern city state, kind of like Europe or the United States or something. So let's just go with like if you grew up in like the United States. Nate, yeah, somebody born in the United States is probably going to have a better chance of living a pretty moderate life with very little like violence and horrible drama to it. Like basically they can live a relatively seemingly normal life without the constant risk of things trying to kill them. While paralleling it with an example of somebody born in like Somalia, a war torn nation that spawns piracy. So it's like the person in the United States will probably live a pretty normal life and just go on to do pretty mundane, normal things. While the person that's born in Somalia will probably likely live to become a pirate, criminal, or whatever because they live in such a more violent region of the world that kind of pushes for that lifestyle because there's fewer options to not do that. Or there's fewer options to live a more mundane life because it's such a war torn, because it's just such a war torn area. And if you don't really think about it, it makes sense for what she's trying to get across, where the underlying idea is people are just born into situations and there's not too much that can really be done. So them ending up the way they did was more or less something that was going to happen in the end anyway. But the overall issue with this idea is if you really take it to its logical conclusion, you kind of end up with somebody that committed murder isn't responsible for committing murder because the life they lived to that point led to that as an inevitability or something. And it's like, no, that's not. It's like, no, that's not how the world works. Like, that person still made the choice to kill another human being and is going to be locked away for a very long time for it. It's like that's kind of like how it came across for me, where it's just like you'd think about it if you think about it even for a little bit, you kind of just get to that logical conclusion of this kind of excuses somebody committing a horrific crime and saying, well, the world around them pushed them to that decision. That's not their fault. It's like, no, it still is. And the worst, it's like it actually makes what she's trying to get across less solid and more confusing. And then she tries to explain it better later in the story, and it still ends up in the same vein of no, this still seems like just like an excuse to try and get somebody to not get away, to kind of get away with killing another person. It's like this really isn't the greatest example to use for what you're trying to accomplish. It's not, it's very weird. I don't I'm sure tons of people wouldn't take it that way as well, but but I think a little bit, but just even a little bit of thinking on it just leads to wait a minute, that isn't right. This can lead to a far darker path. But other than two moments where this girl will probably confuse you with her examples for justifying her social warrior tendencies, it's not a bad story in the least. Like, that's not even bad moments. It's just that they're confused. They just lead to a bit of confusion. But overall, it's a good story, and I do recommend it. It's a nice quick read. I can't remember if it's behind ads or not, but yeah, it doesn't matter. It's still a good story, and I recommend it. So, like always, the list of stories is down in the description. Pick one you would like me to talk about next time, and I'll see you then.